This journey that I took with Susie Wiles, of her speaking to me unguarded and on the record for 11 months. It's interesting that the White House has not disputed a single fact in the piece because we're on absolutely solid ground. My instinct, having covered a few White Houses, is that with this White House and with Susie, it's never four-dimensional chess. Ever. I think Michael Wolff would agree with me, probably.
I think he would.
It's never even three-dimensional chess. It's not even chess.
Is it checkers?
It might be checkers.
I'm Joanna Coles. This is the Daily Beast podcast. And what a hullabaloo out of the White House over Chris Whipple, a former producer for 60 Minutes and ABC News, and now a contributor to Vanity Fair. What a hullabaloo about his piece on Susie Wiles, Donald Trump's chief of staff. Chris Whipple did 11 interviews with Susie Wiles, and oh, what secrets she revealed. J.D. Vance's transformation from someone who thought that Donald Trump was the new Hitler to his vice president was a political decision. Elon Musk, when he's tweeting crazy things, is in fact microdosing. And Donald Trump has an alcoholic's personality. Well, the White House itself has come out with its arms around Susie Wiles. The entire cabinet has tweeted their support, and Donald Trump has said, she barely spoke to Chris Whipple, maybe one, maybe two interviews. It's very clear he didn't know very much about it. Anyway, no time to waste. We have the man himself right here. Chris Whipple, let's get into it. Chris, you posted on Facebook last night that the most important piece you'd ever done was going to drop this morning at 7 o'clock. It did drop, and I think it's fair to say all hell has broken out in the White House. Every single member of the cabinet has tweeted about your subject. Tell us why this is the most important piece you've ever done.
It's one of those cases where, Joanna, every once in a while in a reporter's career, lightning strikes. And this was surely a case, this journey that I took with Susie Wiles, of her speaking to me with unguarded and on the record for 11 months. It's extraordinary. And it's an extraordinary glimpse. It's not just a profile of a person who I think is arguably the most fascinating person in American politics, but it's an inside glimpse of Trump 2.0 from a member of the inner circle. And so for those reasons, this just doesn't happen very often. But you can read all about it in Vanity Fair.
So, Chris, why is she so upset about it? I mean, this has prompted Susie Wiles, who you say is the most important woman in American politics.
Most fascinating.
Most fascinating, yes. You've driven her to Twitter. She hasn't tweeted for over a year. And she said today, the article published early this morning is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff and cabinet in history. And then she goes on to say, significant context was disregarded and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story. I assume after reading it that this was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. Why do you think she's so upset by your piece?
Well, let's put this in a little bit of perspective, shall we? I'm old enough to remember the Watergate era when Ben Bradley used to refer to non-denial denials, and this is right up there. I'm not saying this is Watergate. It is an inside glimpse into the White House, but it's interesting that the White House has not disputed a single fact in the piece because we're on absolutely solid ground. Everything in that piece, everything Susie said was on the record. and on tape, by the way. So, look, I understand that, they've made a statement. It speaks for itself. But the Vanity Fair piece is absolutely solid, and all of her comments were on the record.
And of course, all the people around her sat for photographs too, we should point out.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you said, your access was unprecedented, certainly in Trump 2.0. What did you tell her about the piece before you embarked on this journey together?
Well, I first spoke to her back in January, 10 days before she took office. And at that point, she knew that I was the author of a book on White House chiefs of staff. She was the incoming White House chief of staff.
Now, and your book, of course, is The Gatekeepers, and you interviewed 17, I think, chiefs of staff for it, and 2 presidents.
That's right. And so, look, I think that she was open to talking to me because I do think that because of the gatekeepers, I had a reputation for fairness and for for being very open, even-handed on both sides of the aisle. When the subject of Vanity Fair came up, that this would become a piece for Vanity Fair, I can tell you she was all in. She was enthusiastic about it, and here we are. So
what did Donald Trump know about the piece?
Good question. I honestly don't know. I dealt with Susie. We spoke. We had 11 long interviews over 11 months, and I told her at one point that I'd be certainly open to talking to the president, but that didn't happen. And so I not only interviewed Susie in depth on the record over all that time, but I interviewed Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, James Blair, Taylor Budowich, the whole inner circle.
Russell Vogt.
Yeah. And everybody knew that the conversations were on the record. And as you alluded to, they welcomed Vanity Fair's photographer into the White House. They knew who he was. They'd seen his portfolio. This couldn't have been more, on above board and on the record.
So as we've been talking, the president has just weighed in. And as we said in the introduction, Susie Wiles described him as having an alcoholic's personality, which I want to unpack in a moment.
Sure.
But he says that she was actually right to tell you that he has an alcoholic's personality and that he's got full faith in Susie Wiles to continue in her role. And he also added that he avoids alcohol, which I think we know, saying in the interview that he has a possessive and addictive type personality and that he wasn't offended by her word choice. He then went on to say, I didn't read it, but I don't read Vanity Fair, but she's done a fantastic job.
How about that? A fact check from Donald Trump. I'll take it.
A fact check from Donald Trump.
I'll take it. Yeah, look, the whole business of Trump having an alcoholic's personality, of course, was fascinating.
Well, I was literally coming on to that to say, what does she mean by that? Unpack that for us.
Yeah. So one of the fascinating things about Susie Wiles is that not only that she ran a brilliant campaign in 2024 against all the odds and got Donald Trump elected. He would not be president without her. She's the first female chief of staff in history, as we all know. But she has this extraordinary background, this journey. She was daughter of the famous sportscaster Pat Summerall, who was an absentee parent and an alcoholic. She helped stage interventions with her mother to get him into treatment. He was sober for 21 years before he died. But she'd be the first to tell you that she has a PhD in difficult men.
Don't we all? Don't we all, Chris?
Some women more than others, maybe. Susie, I tell you, she's world class when it comes to dealing with difficult men. She was raised by Pat Summerall. So she understands the personality of an alcoholic. And when she applies it to Donald Trump. Obviously, she doesn't mean that he's a drinker. As far as we know, he's not. But he does have this grandiose personality, untethered sometimes to reality. My words, not hers. But if you want to read her description of and pick up Vanity Fair, I mean, she describes, again, how he believes, paraphrasing now, there's nothing, zilch, nada, that he cannot accomplish, that he cannot do. And what she's saying is that's very much like an alcoholic's personality. Even though Donald Trump doesn't drink.
Right, and that they're always, and when they do drink, they become bigger and even bigger, which, as you point out, he doesn't do that. So I want to come into some of the very specific quotes she gives you, but I wanted to ask you something. She's a woman that claims not to like the limelight, to shun the limelight. She very specifically says to you, here's the sofa where Donald Trump's key members sit, and here's my chair. I sit off to the side. And yet she found the time to sit with you or talk to you for 11 interviews. What's that about?
I don't know. I can't read her mind. I cannot definitively tell you why she decided to go on this amazing journey with me. I'm grateful to her that she did. I like to think that maybe behind all the obfuscation and the comments that are being put out there today, that maybe deep down she knows the piece is fair, because it is. There's certainly her words, not mine. I was scrupulous about trying to be very fair and even-handed. But you're right. Greta Garbo of White House Chiefs of Staff. She's just not someone that you see on camera or hear from at all. I mean, she's done a few interviews, as you know, but nothing like this before. And I honestly think that she believed, I don't think this was four-dimensional chess of some kind. I just think this was Susie Wiles believing that she would get a fair shake from me. And maybe she doesn't think she did today, but I think she believed she would, and I think she got it.
Okay, so what I am going to add is just a couple more words from Donald Trump, who said, this is coming out as we're
Please,
talking.
I want to hear it.
Yeah, I think from what I hear, the facts were wrong, and it was a very misguided interviewer, purposely misguided. Yeah. And then this is clearly him talking about Susie. Yeah, deceived. And he didn't have great access. A couple of very short interviews. And Susie generally doesn't do interviews, Trump said.
My reaction to that is hilarious. I mean, all you have to do is check the White House logs. And the phone calls that we had. I mean, we had, again, 11, count them, 11 in-depth, on-the-record interviews. 2 visits in person at the White House. I spent the whole day in the Roosevelt Room. That was my office one day when we did the portraits of her inner circle. And the Trump had wandered across the hall. He would know we were there. He didn't. But anyway, I find that kind of fascinating.
Do you think, knowing what you know about him and what he's just said to the New York Post, which I read to you, do you think that he's now going to be annoyed with her for having done this? I mean, we know that Donald Trump doesn't like it when the people around him get a lot of press, or more press than he does, but he also doesn't like it when they get no press, because that's when he ignores them. Do you think he's jealous of her in this moment?
I can't read Donald Trump's mind. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze him. But, he doesn't shrink from a good fight either. I say, bring it. Let's have the fight. If he wants, over the facts here. The facts are incontestable, and the interviews are what they are, and Susie said what she said. But you know what? Peter Baker of the New York Times did a big story about my story this morning. Mm-hmm. She compared it to the huge flap over David Stockman, who was an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. And started talking to a magazine and gave in-depth interviews in which he revealed that, in effect, trickle-down economics was smoke and mirrors, and it caused a huge sensation. I was flattered when Peter compared this piece to that in its impact, because Susie, while she's not breaking with Trump, in her candor, she has revealed, some unspoken truths about the way this White House functions. But I'm not at all sure. Apologies for the long-winded answer. I'm not at all sure that Trump's going to dump her. Stockman was taken to the woodshed by the White House chief of staff, James Baker. Almost lost his job. Nancy Reagan wanted him fired, but his was saved.
Well, I was curious that the entire cabinet have tweeted in her support.
Well, of course they have, because she is, except for Donald Trump, the most powerful person in the Trump White House. And Donald Trump is unswervingly loyal and protective of her. And of course, they're all going to support her. And quite frankly, why not? I mean, she's been good to them. She runs a pretty tight ship in the White House. I know that may be hard for some people to believe, but compared to Trump 1.0, they like her. So why not?
Well, because she reveals some things about them which aren't particularly attractive, perhaps. So let's look at that. Elon Musk microdosing on ketamine when he's tweeting all sorts of things. He's an odd duck, she says. J.D. Vance, who's someone that, as we know, in 2016 was describing Donald Trump as the new Hitler, she says, made the move towards Trump as a political move. Those are not flattering things to hear about you, especially from the chief of staff to the president of the United States.
So in fairness to Susie, let me just be clear that she wants to be clear that she has no personal knowledge that Musk was microdosing ketamine when he put out those crazy tweets about Hitler and Stalin.
Right, but why would Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, who's extremely experienced at this stuff, talk to an interviewer and say it then?
Well, because she was unguarded and she was freewheeling, and I give her huge credit for being candid on the subject of Vance. That was fascinating, and this is something really worth reading in Vanity Fair, because this was a case where I asked her about the conversion, 180-degree conversion of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio from never-Trumpers to powerful acolytes. And she said of Rubio, boy, that was really principled. Marco does not violate his principles, and it took him a while to get there. By contrast, she said of Vance, the vice president, well, he was running for the Senate and his conversion was sort of political, quote unquote. So I found that remarkably candid and interesting. And there you go.
Did you talk to her about whether either of them could take over from Donald Trump, who is, after all, 79?
Yeah, no, not specifically about that. I mean, I certainly talked about the president's health. She insists that the president is fine, that his health is good. She said, my health is good, his is great, as she put it in the piece. I didn't specifically talk about whether they could take over, but look, I think she's a J.D. Vance fan. Despite that crack she made, that remarkable little bit of insight about his conversion, she's a J.D. Vance fan. And she really likes Rubio. They go way back, to Florida in politics, as you know. This is a cabinet that she is all for. But it's remarkable when she starts talking about how the sausage was made from day one, when she tried to talk Trump out of doing a blanket pardon for the January 6th insurrectionists, to the moment when she said, let's cut out this revenge and retribution, to all the way to the 11 months. It's a wild, fascinating ride. So
you interviewed 17 chiefs of staff for your book, The Gatekeepers. Where does Susie Wiles sit in that list of men. She's the first female chief of staff. Where does she rate in terms of from 1 to 17?
Well, she's historic, obviously, as the first female chief of staff. She has an extraordinarily close bond relationship with the president, which is half the battle as White House chief of staff. She's run a pretty smooth ship when you consider Trump 1.0, when it was a killing field where White House chiefs went to die.
Well, I think he got through 4 in his first term, correct?
That's right. That's right. It was mission impossible. Trump, it was just, again, from Lance Priebus to Don Kelly to Mick Mulvaney to Mark Meadows, there was blood all over the floor. Very different. Trump 2.0, you could argue that the difference between Trump 2.0 and 1.0 is largely Susie Wiles and then how she's managed the White House. As cabinet is crazy, as we know. But she deserves credit for that. Having said that, the big overarching question of her tenure as White House chief, which is really kind of the arc of my Vanity Fair journey with her, is to what extent she can do the most important duty of any White House chief, which is to tell the president what he doesn't want to hear. You'll see the journey that she takes in which she tries to do that to some extent early on. And by the end, readers can judge for themselves, but it's a journey.
She said that Donald Trump has an alcoholic's personality. What did she say about Pete Hegseth?
She's a Pete Hegseth fan. When I asked her about it, she thinks the cabinet is a brilliant cabinet. Some outside observers might say this is the least qualified cabinet in modern history. But from Susie's point of view, they are, quote unquote, disruptors. And that's what she thinks that the system needs. She thinks that Hegseth, ask her about the deep state, and she'll say it's not in the State Department, it's the military-industrial complex. She thinks Hegseth is the guy to stand up to them. She calls Bobby Kennedy, another world-class disruptor, my Bobby, quirky Bobby. So she's all in with this cabinet.
And she says she's not an enabler, and she says she's not a bitch. What does that mean?
Well, it was fascinating because, as you pointed out, I know a few White House chiefs of staff, including Leon Panetta, who was arguably, along with James A. Baker III, the gold standard of White House chiefs.
And of course, Leon Panetta was Bill Clinton's chief of staff, and James Baker was
Ronald Reagan's.
Ronald Reagan's. I was going to say George H. Bush. Ronald Reagan's. Yes. I spoke
to Panetta in the course of writing this piece and asked him what he thought of Susie Wiles. And he said from where he sat out in California, he's never met her, just observing, he couldn't decide whether she's an enabler or a disciplinarian who's really trying to get Trump to do the right thing. I repeated this to Susie, Leon's comment, and really got a rise out of her. I think the trigger was the word enabler. She did not like that word. And so, as you quoted her a minute ago, she said, I'm not an enabler and I'm not a bitch. That's about as salty as Susie Wiles gets.
But I didn't really understand what she meant by that. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, listen, I can't read her mind, but look, there's one way.
You keep saying that, but you interviewed her 11 times. You must have an idea.
No, I said I couldn't read Trump's mind. I don't think I said that before now. But, look, I think you readers can judge for themselves what she means by that. But one possible interpretation is that she finds it more difficult to speak hard truths as a woman, that she might feel that she'd be considered a bitch if she did. So that's one possible interpretation. But what I can tell you is that it was revealing to me that I got such a rise out of her when I quoted Leon Panetta, because I think the notion that a revered White House chief like him might think she's an enabler really did not sit well.
That's a very interesting interpretation, that as a woman she might find it harder to speak truth to power.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I was going to put something to Michael Wolff, who, as you know, also had access to Trump 1 and sat in the White House for 7 months before he wrote The Fire and Fury and went on to write 4 books about Donald Trump, says that what he understands from people in the White House is that Susie Wiles is not a chief of staff as we know it, as you would think of it traditionally with the 17 people you've interviewed, but that she's really an administrator in chief, and that the way to survive there is never to tell Trump that he's wrong, or never to try and divert him, because he's wise to that from Trump 1.
Well, look, Michael's got a point, and obviously knows a lot about Trump and the Trump White House. But it's true that her strong suit has been her ability to run the White House, which none of her predecessors could do on Trump 1.0. You
say run the White House, but it seems like the cabinet or the president lurches from moment to moment. A lot of the policies don't seem to be thought out. They don't seem to be discussed with people. I mean, I understand this idea of disrupting, but it felt like they didn't understand what they were disrupting.
I'm making a distinction between the White House and the administration.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the executive branch and the White House, which is where the real power resides. But look, there's plenty of policy chaos. There's no question about that. But I think if you're really asking me where she stands in the pantheon of White House chiefs of staff, we don't know yet. But the most important duty, the ultimate test of a White House chief of staff, is being able to walk into the Oval Office, close the door, and tell the president what he doesn't want to hear. And what you can see if you read the Vanity Fair piece is this journey that she takes from day 56, when I said to her, do you ever go in and tell him, let's cut out this revenge and retribution stuff and govern? She said, I did. I had that conversation, and we had a loose agreement, quote unquote, that it would end after 90 days. But so where are we now?
Right. So, didn't end.
Yeah. So you can follow her journey where she's pushing back or trying to tap the brakes early on to where she is today and draw your own conclusions. But the real test is, has she told him hard truths?
Mm-hmm.
Has she been able to tell him, no, you shouldn't go down this road, and here's why, and will he listen? And boy, it's just not clear that she's able to do that.
Right. So you don't think it's clear she's able to do that? That's certainly the implication from the piece.
Well, and I want readers to judge, but as I say, what I find fascinating is this journey she takes over the course of a year. And if this were a piece about, there's a simplistic sort of school of thought that Trump is just surrounded by a bunch of enablers, an amen chorus. And it's not, and in Susie's case, I think it's more interesting and nuanced and fascinating.
She says in the piece that no one else could do this job, that she is the only person that could do this job. She sat with you for 11 interviews, or she talked to you for 11 interviews. I think sometimes you were on the phone. She was folding her laundry. She was just coming back from church.
To Trump, apparently I only spoke to her once or twice, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, according to the president, it was a couple of interviews, not very much access. In fact, as you said, you had unprecedented access.
Yeah.
Why does she want this attention, do you think? Why did she do this? Again, without trying to psychoanalyze her or pretend that I know the answer, my best guess is that she really felt that she would get a fair hearing. She believes that Trump was vilified in his first term and unfairly portrayed by a bunch of jackals in the media. And I think she thought, maybe because I'd done a very even-handed book about White House chiefs,
in part, I think she honestly felt that she could get a fair hearing. She may or may not think so today. But I think going in, that's what she thought.
How many of the people that you've spoken to or that appear in the photos in Vanity Fair, and I urge everybody to look at the photos in particular because they're very, Christopher Anderson's photos, which accompany your very thoughtful piece, are completely riveting and very exposing. How many people of those people have spoken to you privately today? How many have you heard from privately?
Susie. One person.
And what did she say?
We exchanged text, and I don't want to get into what she said because that's a private communication, but you've seen what she's saying publicly, and you've seen what they're tweeting. And so I think that speaks for itself. But
I'm asking you a different question. Does that reflect what she said to you in her private texts to you?
Well, again, I don't want to characterize what we talked about, but I think that we've all seen, you've seen, and you've read some of the public reaction from the White House to the piece, and my answer to that is, sure sounds like the old days, non-denial denials. Not a single fact of the piece has been, and for good reason. There's nothing to contest.
Well, Chris, what it reminds me of as a British person is how the royal family, and in particular Princess Diana, used to deal with the media, which was that, and we know this from Andrew Morton's book, where she sat down and with a friend and she gave tape after tape after tape of stories, which Andrew Morton wrote up in his best-selling book, who, of course, title is now escaping me. It went on to be a huge bestseller, and she issued all sorts of denials. The royal family said they were going to sue over it. She would regularly talk to a specific journalist from the Daily Mail. He would then splash what she told him on the front page, and then she would issue a denial saying, this is outrageous, I'm being hounded by the tabloid press, when in fact she was talking to them all along. So what I'm trying to figure out is Susie Wiles trying to have it both ways, like the British royal family, where they say one thing and then deny it. So they're trying to get the public on board with them while also getting their side of the story out. And of course here, this is about an audience of one for Susie Wiles. It's about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is saying, this man, Chris Whipple, had limited access, maybe to interviews.
My instinct about this, having covered a few White Houses, is that with this White House and with Susie, it's never four-dimensional chess, ever. I think Michael Wolff would agree with me, probably.
I think he would.
It's never even three-dimensional chess. It's not even chess.
Is it checkers?
It might be checkers, but I just don't think they're that clever about it or calculating. And I honestly think, I've certainly heard all kinds of people speculating that Susie was saying what she said to me to somehow position herself for the post-Trump, career. Nonsense is my gut feeling. My gut feeling is she just started talking and wanted to talk. Thought she had a not a sympathetic but a fair ear, and just kept talking. And here we are.
So J.D. Vance tweeted out, if any of us have learned a lesson from the Vanity Fair article, I hope the lesson is we should be giving fewer interviews to mainstream media outlets. Is this the end of the cabinet talking to mainstream media?
Well, it hasn't struck me that they've been doing much to this point. This piece wouldn't be rocking the political world the way it has in the last few hours if they'd been talking to the mainstream media a lot. They're not. So I don't see that as a sea change in the Trump White House approach to the media. Sounds like, alas, no lesson has been learned in this case.
OK, so Chris, I have a final question for you. And for anybody who's interested, I suddenly remembered the title of Diana's book. It's Diana, A True Story. And of course, she said it wasn't a true story, but she was the actual source.
Wait a minute. Whose book are we promoting here anyway? So it's Vanity Fair's piece. I'm teasing. I'm kidding.
I know you're teasing. Here's my final question for you, and I should have checked. I should have checked on this. But what is the likelihood of Susie Wiles being in her job in 3 months' time?
90%.
So there's a 10% chance this piece gets her fired.
Well, I'm making up the percentages, but I just think that David Stockman survived his trial by fire when he spoke out of school to the Atlantic over months and months during the Reagan White House. Susie Wiles is way closer to Donald Trump than Stockman was to Reagan. I think there's a bond there. And frankly, Susie's right in a sense that there is no obvious person to do this job other than her. She has a kind of bond with Trump that he never had with any of her predecessors. And I can't think of anybody else that he would want in that job.
Do you know what that reminds me of? Margaret Thatcher saying that in politics, no one is unassailable.
Yeah. Well, and certainly nobody is indispensable. So I'm not saying that she might not lose her job. It could happen. But boy, it doesn't sound like it from the early comments by Donald Trump.
Did you like her?
She's really a likable person. And that's what was so fascinating about these conversations, is that she seemed willing in a way that, look, I've covered a few White Houses. I wrote two books. One book about the Biden White House, another book about the Biden the 2024 campaign. Senior White House officials hardly ever speak to you on the record. They're all on background, deep background, quote approval, and yard. Susie, to her credit, was willing to just let it rip. And boy, did she.
Well, Chris, it's a fascinating piece for those who want to read it. It's two-parter in Vanity Fair. Who knew magazines even ran two-parters anymore? But congratulations on a truly riveting read. And we will watch Susie Wiles with great care. Michael Wolff has a wonderful description of Donald Trump when he first sees her. And as you mentioned, she was working for Ron DeSantis at the time. And he said, "Who's the refrigerator?" That's how he referred to her. And yet you say now they have a bond.
When they first sat down and had a talk about working together, Donald Trump was sort of in awe. He was sitting there with the daughter of the great Pat Summerall. He believes in two things. He believes in winning, and he believes in great genes, Genes. And she had it.
Fascinating. Chris, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, a chief of staff who decided that despite the chaos going on in America and indeed the ripple effects around the world, that she had time and she could make time for not one, not two, not five, not 10, but 11 interviews with 60 Minutes former producer and ABC News former producer Chris Whipple. So what was she thinking? She said she alone could do the job. And Donald Trump has come out in support, saying he loves her, he supports her, and that she probably gave very limited access to the reporter, maybe one or two interviews. How do we think this is going to end? My prediction? Not well. Not well. If you have been Thank you for joining us. Find Chris Whipple's piece. It's completely riveting, as are, I should say, Christopher Anderson's photos. Don't forget to subscribe to The Daily Beast and leave us a comment on YouTube. We love to know what you think, and I try and respond to as many as I possibly can. Don't forget to check out Inside Trump's Head, where Michael Wolff and I go deep today in Donald Trump's response to the terrible, terrible killing of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer. Until tomorrow, until Thursday. So many podcasts all the time. It's raining podcasts. So big thank you to Sandra Clark, Me Thinks, Travels with Carl, Andrew Beaver, Capinator, Harry Clark, Dawn McCarthy, Daniel Doglover, M. Greiner, Fulvia Orlando, Herbie, Andrew Mellor, or Mellor, as Michael always says, Laz Conde, Bonzo, Val Love, Francisco, Andrea Hodel, Bocock DC, Sharon Shipley, Connie Rutherford, Karen White, and Heidi Riley. Thank you to our production team, Devon Rogerino, Anna von Urson, and Jessie Millward.